this segment, we're going to show you how to do a multi-layer abutment. So a previous segment, we showed you how to do a full contoured screw retain crown. Very similar, just a couple of changes. So in the beginning, if you're going to do a multi-layer abutment, you got to choose two materials because you're going to have the framework and then you're going to have the crown that's cemented on the framework. So I went and selected multi-layer abutment. The design mode, you're going to select whatever you use. I use biogeneric individual. The teeth on each side were normal anatomy, so the computer will be able to scan and pick from a whole group of phenotypes, so I'm not going to go and change that. The material that's going to be the framework is we selected as IPS Emax CAD abutment. If you want a zirconia, you can go ahead and select that. This was just defaulted from our last segment. But if you want to select a material, you have Sirona is their Icornis, and so I select Sirona, and you'll see the Icornis ZI Miso. That's if you want to use a zirconia framework abutment. You can select that. Now the veneering structure, whatever you want to put as your cement retained crown. And so you got the CEREC blocks, C, these are your feldspathic, IPS Empress CAD, that's your lucite reinforced. If you want to go ahead and just grab your Emax, go into Ivoclar, select your Emax CAD. So as I have it situated right now or selected, I'm going to do a zirconia framework with a cement retained Emax. But again, you can change your framework to be Emax as well, and then select your milling device. Dentsply Sirona Other, Nobel Replace Select 5.0 is the implant that was placed in number 14. Select for that. And then we're going to select number 14, and then I'm going to show you that it's the same process as doing a screw retain crown. The difference is once we design it. Let's go ahead and acquire. What I do, once I advance it to the acquisition mode, there's one catalog that I want to add before we actually scan. You'll notice they only have the lower jaw, upper jaw, and the buccal bite. The upper jaw is defaulted because we selected number 14 as the tooth or the area we're scanning, so it automatically defaults there. However, I want to get a tissue moulage scan. So if you upper right, you look, it says add catalog. Select gingival mask upper, since we're working with tooth number 14, and that adds another catalog down at the bottom. You'll see it highlights gingival mask upper. What I'm going to do is just scan the tissue. So it turned on there. I pick up my OmniCam, and you'll see it on the screen, just the tissue. So a quick little scan, picking up tissue, just like you would for a model, the tissue moulage. And so it scanned that. Now I'm ready to actually scan the tie base. My recommendation is to go ahead and turn off the camera and take off the tissue off your cast and go ahead and put the tie base on the cast. You can't see that since it's only, I'm doing this outside. You can't see it because you're only seeing the screen. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting the tie base onto number 14 without the tissue, so I can actually look and make sure it's seated correctly on the implant. Actually, I could probably take a video of that and you could see it. And so what I did is I just took the tie base and placed it on the 5.0, and I can actually see it without the tissue. I can see that it's fully seated onto the cast. If you were to do this intraorally with the scan post, you would then have to take a radiograph and confirm it's seated, because obviously the patient's gingiva is in the way. But now that I removed the tissue moulage, you can see that it's fully seated. And now I'm going to grab the scan body and place that on there. The OmniCam is gray. They are gray and white caps. And I'm going to marry those up so they're correct. And I'm going to show you again just with the video. You'll see that gray cap. It is a triangle. The triangle is an isosceles triangle. The two longer sides are pointing to that little outcropping. You can kind of see now that little bleb or push out is where that has married up with the tie base, and it's fully seated. You just kind of push down with your finger and make sure it's seated. In the mouth, you may have to use a hemostat to make sure it's fully seated, and it goes down. Suggestion is you can also mark that little outcropping in marker, so a Sharpie or something like that. But once that's on, you can go ahead and scan it. Make sure that you are selecting the upper jaw, and go ahead and select that. Turn on your camera and you'll see it here with the scan body on. This is going to be a full scan, so I need all the teeth adjacent to the implant. You don't need like necessarily a full arch or the full maxilla, so I'm just scanning the teeth. I really don't need that third molar, but you know, OCD, I like to grab it, I guess, but just make sure you get everything covered. We've noticed that with the Omnicam it's difficult sometimes to get the proximal contacts. You see how I rolled it back there on that premolar, and it looks like that molar contact has been captured. And as I turn off the camera, you're going to watch it. It's going to marry up the tissue upper mass that we took with our scan. And it's kind of, what would you say, a little bit transparent. But as I rotate it around, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing that it didn't capture. Maybe I'll just go back in there and scan it a little bit more just to be sure. But it's kind of captured the top portion of the scan body. I'm just going to go in there and grab it just to make sure. Just going to rotate it, pick it up. So I think I got it. All right. So now the next is pretty straightforward. We're going to go ahead and scan the lower arch and then the buccal bite. I just like to scan distal to mesial, then I rotate it, push it back from the buccal, rotate again, go from the lingual, pull it through, and that's pretty much all you need. And then we'll go ahead and scan the buccal bite. Now sometimes the scan body gets in the way of your occlusion and you can actually take it off, but in this case you'll see that I'm able to occlude and take the buccal bite with the scan body not in the way right there, but just getting the buccal bite like you normally would do, and done. So let's give it a second for it to think, and then we'll advance it forward. Looks like everything down here looks good. The gingival mask married up and it gave me a green check, so that means that I got a good scan and they're able to connect to each other. So let's advance it forward for the model and let it do its thing, just like you would for any other restoration. My understanding in the new software 4.5, this might be a little different, but it gives you just a visual cue as it's correlating the models. So the models have been correlated, and you'll notice that they have the occlusion. Just double check, look at, you have even occlusion everywhere, so the models will correctly capture in the correct bite. Sometimes, every now and again, I'll get a little bit of occlusion on the scanning body. You'll notice that right there, but I don't think that will be a big deal. And so what we're going to do now is set the model axis like you would normally for any other restoration. You can change if you want the upper or lower cast. Right now it's showing us the upper, so I'm just going to go ahead and change it to the lower jaw and just place it in the tray. Set your curve of SPI. I think this was a typodont, so they're somewhat straight. Sometimes you'll get somebody a little bit curvy. Kind of your curva Wilson there, but. And you do that normally for it, that's nothing new. You know that step. So we'll advance it forward to the design. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to identify the area that you want to actually trim. This is a required step for an implant. If you do a normal crown, you don't have to trim the model, but for the implant it does. So what I usually start is distal to the implant, double click to start or anchor. You can make single clicks if you want, if you get to go around, but you can then follow up with a double click and it cuts that distal half off. Just rotate your image a little bit and then do the same thing, mesial to the implant, double click to start, single click, but if you have a good line, go ahead and double click, you'll see it cuts it off. Notice the implant grayed out. Just go ahead and double click on this image right here over the implant, and now it's the selection we want. Go ahead and hit apply and it'll trim away everything else. So we're just looking at a trimmed implant with the scan body. There's some little bit of chatter or a little bit of scatter there. I don't think that should be a big deal, but you'll see the next step was go ahead and click the scan body head. Very simple. Click on the head, just rotate it, get a good sight picture, double click on the apex of the triangle, puts a dot there. Now you notice our gingival mask is now integrated with our tie base. It likes to guess or draw kind of a baseline. This not necessarily needs to be changed, but you just kind of look at how you want your contour, how you want your implant to look as it comes through the tissue. Some people like it to put that blue line just on the outside edge of your tissue. On a posterior implant, no one seems to take the time to actually mold the tissue anymore. But if you've got a nice tapered abutment for a healing, like a healing abutment that has some shape, this will actually be formed very well. If it's not, you're going to get a cylindrical tissue form, and then you'll have to either use a laser or some other type of tissue contour. But for right now, we're just going to edit the baseline just like you would for drawing a margin on a tooth. Start with a double click, single click, get you little anchor points. What I found is you've got to come back eventually to the original line. You'll notice I'm coming right there, double click, and it erases that line that it started with. And you kind of notice I may want to come up in here a little bit. So again, start with a double click and then single click to get you some little curves. If you do it too far, too fast, you'll get more of a straight line. And you see that looks like a pretty good baseline. And what I like about this software now is it tells you what tooth number you're looking at. So if you have a number besides 14, you click the wrong tooth. The dotted line shows you the axis of the implant, and that will come into play next. But we've got the baseline edited. We got the tissue moulage superimposed. Let's go ahead and define the axis. Now this really depends on how the implant was placed. The software is showing you what would be straight up and down, and you'll see the dotted line is kind of that implant. So that implant was actually placed a little buckle, probably a little bit too buckly. That's why we want to try to do guided surgery. The change it, you can do it up here. You see this little toggle button. You notice my crown or the path of draw is lining up, and I'm just changing that. You may have to change your rotation just to kind of see that. I don't know if you noticed that a little bit. I did it for you to show you that you can go ahead and align those. Those do not necessarily have to be aligned. It's just that dotted line showing you the path of the implant, and then you're just lining up your crown with your adjacent contacts. So since we're doing a multi-layer abutment, once we have the axis set and now we're in the design mode, we have to give our parameters of just the crown that's going to be cemented on the abutment. And so you can change the space cement thickness, and up here you just toggle between whatever your requirement for cement is. I think 120 might be a little little much, but yeah, probably with 100 or a little less. You can change your milling offset. I don't change that a lot. I just kind of leave that at 0. And your proximal, occlusal, and dynamic contact strength based on the parameters you put in your system. So you can change this to your restoration. So if you find that when your contact strengths are too light and you've been leaving it at a certain level, you can go ahead and change it here. But I found when you're working with a lot of different people using machines, things get kind of thrown off a little bit. And then remember when we were doing full contour, we were playing around with the gingival depth. This gingival depth, we talked about the gingival placement pressure. That's when you change the abutment as it goes down onto the implant. I like to go around 300. That increases the width, gives you a little bit more material around the tie base. The gingival depth is going to be more of where your margins are going to be. So on a posterior crown, especially if you're using Emax as your framework and Emax as your crown, probably not a big deal where you want to hide your margin. But here we have the zirconia, and then it's going to be a different material. Emax will be on top of it. You really don't want the zirconia to show, but if you want to bury your margin, you can change this gingival depth. Watch the line kind of disappear below the tissue. So an anterior crown, that's important. Posterior, I'm going to leave it equal gingival. I don't need to have it subgingival at all, but at least you can kind of see when I toggle that, you see what happens to the line. The shoulder width is how thick your basically your prep design on your custom abutment's going to be. So 1/1000 of a millimeter all the way around. So you'll see if I toggle that, increase your shoulder width is going to decrease your chimney of your custom abutment, so there's less material around the upper portion. That could be a problem, so be careful making it too wide of a shoulder. So the default is around 1,000. I usually don't mess with it much, but if you want, you can make that a little bit thicker. Just remember, and you can see on the cartoon, this does affect this thickness around the screw channel. So if you want a shoulder width larger, you're going to get a thinner amount of material that could technically fracture. Very important in anterior custom abutments. I found those get really, really thin. You can change your telescope angle, ideal taper 6. I don't really mess with that much either. So once you've got the parameters, go ahead and hit OK, and it's going to design or calculate your restoration from our parameters. We'll see what we get on this one. When we did a full contour, it kind of pushed everything to the mesial, but that's not a big deal. We can just turn that off for a second so you can kind of see what it proposed. Yeah, looking okay. Again, I like to do it more of a scale rather than try to move halves around. So my tools, go ahead and move. And let's move this to the center using the left-right arrow. I grabbed the wrong one. So go ahead and position it left to right. So I'm kind of center it. Then I'm going to scale it as an overall restoration just to kind of fill the space. If you kind of see, I'm just wheeling the mouse, the ball around, just kind of filling the space. And then I'll adjust from there. So using my shape tool, you have the anatomical or circular. I like to focus pretty much in a two-dimensional. Look at my cus tips, look at my contour. And you notice that I'm doing the same thing that I was doing for a full contour. You could design your crown first, and then we're going to ask the computer to split. And so right now you're like, where's the custom abutment? Well, it doesn't exist yet in the system, but right now I'm just kind of looking at the contour, the shape of everything. And so I might bring that down a little bit. So it just makes sense. You're going to design the crown first and then tell it to split and make the abutment. So I'm just getting all that prepared. Notice my contact strength's pretty heavy. A quick trick is to go into Tools, go to your contacts, select Contacts and Occlusion, or the occlusal watch. it brought everything down within your parameters. And so we can go and now do some light touching with our circular tool, or you can even go and form and remove. But I like the circular. You can just kind of go in there a little bit quicker, knock things down a little bit faster. So you kind of get the point there, just get where you want it to be. You got your crown, you're gonna do the same thing around your tie base and the tissue. Let me just turn off the upper jaw and just kind of go around the implant again. We're just gonna smooth everything up. Remember, from our last segment, I bulk everything up a little bit and then I go in, use this form smooth tool, just go around like a flame, just melt everything so you don't have those lines. And you'll see I'm getting the contour nice and smooth. And so once you get where you want it to be, we're now going to go ahead and split it. And so it might be a little rough down here. So I got it all smoothed. And now there should be a tool to allow us to split the crown and the abutment. So in your tools, look at the bottom left. I highlighted it right here, split or unsplit. I have the crown positioned, everything I like. Just go ahead and hit split, and then we're going to apply it. And you'll see it drew the baseline, and that baseline now becomes our margin. And so I like how it kind of translucents the crown. You can change and toggle between. Look below, you'll notice what I'm on and highlighted, that's the abutment. If you want to make adjustments to the crown, just click the crown and it comes just like you would a normal crown on a tooth. And so if you wanted to make some more adjustments there, go ahead and select that. There's the abutment. If you want to make adjustments, you can select there. I don't like that abutment on the lingual's a little high. You can kind of see I'm going to just bring it down a little bit. See that? This gave me a little bit thickness of restorative material above that. I still think I have plenty of height of abutment, so I just adjusted that. Just brought it down just a little bit. That gives me thickness of crown. So overall, that looked pretty good. You can again make more adjustments if you want, but I think you get the point from there. If I'm highlighted the abutment and I hit mill, that's what's going to mill first. If you wanted to, for some reason, mill the crown, you could do that. The only concern I have is these are two different materials. Ideally, you could go ahead and mill, if this was zirconia, mill it, go ahead and center it, and then go ahead and select your crown for Emax and go ahead and mill it. In theory, you should be able to bring those together and voila, life is good. I found its additional step is, this is just me, once I get this abutment milled out, centered, I put it on the tie base and put it on the cast, and then I rescan it and have it design a new crown. You don't have to, but sometimes if you have to make adjustments, especially like an anterior crown, if you got to make adjustments of the margins and maybe bury the margins a little bit, you can adjust that a little bit in the lab and then rescan it and design your crown. But in this scenario, we can go ahead and just mill the abutment and then go ahead and mill the crown separately. So since I have the abutment selected, I have it highlighted. When I hit the mill, it puts it in the block. Remember, the blocks are already have a channel in it, so you can't really move the sprue. The sprue is going to come off here. So in the lab, we're going to have to smooth that. There's a possibility you could hit the margin doing that, so that's why I like to do them separately. You'll notice the minimal thickness error is right here. I must have that toggled off, so I'm going to go back to design and add that. Minimal thickness must have been turned off, and that's why. Minimal thickness means I think we did a millimeter, millimeter and a half, but it's poking through. So I'm going to go back to my shape tool and circular anatomic there. You have just a circular 2 dimensions. I'm going to add material there. That's why it was bulked up. The computer's like, hey, it's too thin. So I just added it back and then go back to the mill. That's what happens when you have minimal thickness turned off. You don't see it, but everything's pretty good. So let's go ahead and mill it, the block size in cornice meso L, and it's going to mill it out.